So yeah, I'm Glenn. I work for the Isle of Man Government climate change team, and today I'm presenting about a project that we've been doing recently, which is the impacts of climate change on the Isle of Man. What are the risks that we're facing from climate change, and what are the potential opportunities there? This piece of work was undertaken in conjunction with partners from the Water Research Centre and ADAS in the UK, along with some input from local experts and other government officials. I'd like to say if anybody has any questions whilst we're going along, please feel free. If you see something that you would like to ask a question about, just fire away. And we'll do that as we go along. So globally, the outlook from the impacts on climate change is bleak, I would say. It's probably an understatement. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have found that half a degree over the 1.5 degree threshold. That was the threshold that was initially set out. That was reached 12 consecutive months last year. So we're kind of already at that threshold. So they're saying half a degree over that, which they need 2 degrees. This is from pre-industrial heating. Would lead to substantially more poverty, more extreme heat, increased human mortality, more disease, sea level rise, habitat biodiversity and coral reef loss, and more drought. But obviously that's globally. So what we're looking at is, what does that mean for us here on the Isle of Man? We're unlikely to see a drought and a desertification and things like that they don't see in other countries, but we're not going to get a hurricane anytime soon. Our sea isn't that warm yet. So, what are we going to see here? So as an island, our contribution to climate change may be small on a global scale, but we're not immune to the consequences of climate change. So what other people are doing does impact on us. So the end goal of this piece of work is to inform the development of an adaptation strategy, which is going to mitigate some of the risks that we see here and realise some of the opportunities. Hopefully with the risks you want to mitigate them before you see the impacts of them. You don't want to wait until there's a flooding event or coastal overtopping that causes huge economic or personal loss and then do something. You want to plan and do something first. So that's what this piece of work is looking into, determining the expected impacts and then developing appropriate responses. So here we have here we go. This is really what we're talking about here, adaptation. So mitigation is reducing emissions. Adaptation is thinking about climate change and what you can do to protect yourself. So the team at WRC used the UK CP18 climate models, which are climate projections that were developed in 2018. These are models and tools and data that show how the climate may change in the future. The 2018 version, UK CP18, had 2 new important factors. They updated the probabilistic projections, so basically they give more accurate estimates of different future climate outcomes. They've done this by combining sets of global climate models, the projections from various different countries around the world, the UK Met Office and other experts. And secondly, the set of regional climate model predictions. They've gone to a scale of 12 square kilometres now, and as you can see from here, the Isle of Man actually does have its own unique model predictions at this scale. So these are the most accurate that we currently have on the Isle of Man. So this is what we've been using in this project. Previously, with the scale being much larger, we were sort of just grouped in with the UK. So this is a lot more accurate for the Isle of Man now. what's important to state at this point is that these models give a range of outcomes. So it's not like this is what's going to happen. It's more like this is what's going to happen if under this scenario or under this scenario. So the scenarios that they look at would be a sudden end to the fossil fuels and a change to a net zero economy, or on the other end, a continued, if not increasing, use of fossil fuels and the difference that, those impacts will have on the climate, and then looking at and then taking the most likely outcomes from these and putting models and projections for the Isle of Man forward. So let's start by looking at temperature, which is everyone's favourite climate indicator. These two lines here represent the two likely scenarios. The red line is where warming is limited to 2 degrees, increases to 2 degrees for 2050 and then remains at 2 degrees by through to 2080. And the green line is the global warming increasing to 4 degrees. This is above pre-industrial levels, so that's not from today increasing 4 degrees or from today increasing 2 degrees, that's from the pre-industrial revolution. So temperatures on the Isle of Man are expected to get warmer in all seasons across all scenarios. By 2050, under 2 degrees of warming, as I said, this is reached in both scenarios. Winter temperatures are expected to rise by 0.7 degrees, average annual temperature by 1 degree, and summer temperatures by 1.3 degrees. So that's pretty much our best case scenario in terms of global warming. By 2080, so at the far end of the scale here, under the 4 degree warming scenario, winter temperatures are expected to rise by 1.6 degrees, annual temperatures by 1.9 degrees, and summer temperatures by 2.4 degrees. As an example, this scenario would give the Isle of Man similar temperatures to Jersey today. So that's the sort of scale of difference we're looking at by 2080, which is only 55 years away, which is a lot of change in a short period. So rainfall is more of a mixed bag. We have two different outlooks here. One is summer rainfall and one is winter rainfall. So this one here is the summer rainfall and this one here is the winter rainfall. So by 2050, again, we'll be looking at an average of 9% less rain in the summer, but 11% more rain in the winter. So hotter, drier summers, hotter, wetter winters. But I mean, at the extreme end again, looking at 2080 under 4 degrees, it'd be 17% less summer rain and 21% more winter rain. So if you think how much is raining outside recently, add 20% or so onto that, it's going to be pretty wet in the winter, but it should be quite nice in the summer. Jersey, no rain, we'll be living the dream, I'm sure. But remember, like this year, these are averages. They fluctuate year by year. So when we talk about climate, then we're looking at how the climate is changing in general, not year-to-year fluctuations. So this year, not a good year for modelling warmer summers. So perhaps the most serious impact from climate change faced by the Isle of Man is the global temperature rise on melting glaciers and polar ice caps, leading to sea level rise. So coupled with increased storminess as well, this could have serious impacts on the Isle of Man from coastal flooding and coastal overtopping. So sea level is expected to rise by 16 centimetres under the 2 degrees scenario in 2050. So that's the sort of median for the projections. You have the extreme low and the extreme high projections here. to 0.68 meters, so 68 centimeters of sea level rise by 2080 under the high scenarios. So again, that's, I mean, I'm about 2 meters tall. We're looking at sort of like this much on top of the sea levels that we currently have. So yeah, it's quite extreme. So this graphic shows like all of that sort of data put together through the core scenarios. I think it's at this point it's interesting. It's important to say that 2080 might seem like a really long way away, but it's just 55 years. That is within the lifetime of some of the people in this room. Pretty much all the people in this room have relatives who are living now who will be alive at this point. So it's not a long time for such extreme climate change. As Fiona was saying, like, we need to think about future generations and the decisions that we're making now. So we determined the likely impacts. We identified what those impacts will have on the Isle of Man. So now we need to understand what are the risks from those changes that we're looking at. So we chose 4 time horizons, which were present day, 2050 under the 2 degrees, 2080 under the 2 degrees, and 2080 under the 4 degree scenario. This was based on the UK Climate Change Committee's advice on adaptation, which they've updated recently in the light of lack of credible action on climate change, which is hope for 2 degrees, plan for 4 degrees. So during the workshops that were held on the Isle of Man, we looked at the UK's risk register and determined if that was appropriate for here or what else we would need to add or take away from that. It was all cross-examined with local experts. We're looking at the natural environment, health and communities, the built environment, economy, and international dimensions. So the outcome of this was 119 risks and 14 opportunities. I like to say that this isn't a complete register, and it should be seen as something that risks can be added to or taken away from, and opportunities can be added to. It's not, this is definitively what we're saying. So each risk was subject to evaluation through scoring matrix for each time horizon. So we looked at each time horizon along here, and then the risks, and we put them through the matrix that's here. So you would have the magnitude of scoring. So what is the magnitude of the potential consequences? Very low, low. So that's basically what is the impact, and this is how likely the impact is going to be. So as you can see in present day, 20% of the risks that were analysed were seen as severe and major, whereas 41% were minor or negligible, and this changes to 62% major or severe and 13% minor and negligible under the high scenarios. So there's an increasing risk from climate change. So the likelihood of magnitudes will increase with greater climate change. So looking at the risks, I'm going to pull some examples out and just sort of talk not about the specific risk, but about how we went with the scoring. So some risks are seen as severe now and will remain severe or become increasingly severe throughout the time horizons. So this, if we look at risk 116, which is risks to marine species and habitats from climate change, including ocean acidification and higher water temperatures. It's severe now. We have already seen an increase in the temperatures in the Irish Sea, which have risen by 0.47 degrees, almost half a degree, in the last decade compared to the previous decade. So it's changing quickly, and we've seen very strange spikes in the sea temperature as well recently, which are alarming. So this has already led to biodiversity loss, and if this trend continues, that loss will only intensify. Some risks are of lower concern now, but will become more severe in the future as climate impacts on them more. So risk 87, the risk of drought and water scarcity on the Isle of Man's water infrastructure. There was a hosepipe ban in July 2022, following a dry spring and a continuing dry summer, which wasn't lifted until September. As we spoke about earlier, predicted decrease in summer rain, increase in temperature, it's likely that drought conditions will become more frequent on the Isle of Man. So some of the risks aren't going to become severe and they aren't going to change too much, but they were identified as a risk. This could be due, they're not going to change much, this could be due to like the topography. Maybe excess rain won't lead to excess flooding. It's flooding as much as it will now, or something along those lines. But yes, so basically the changing climate doesn't necessarily exacerbate those risks. But there is good news. There's always good news. Along with the risks to climate change does also present opportunities to the Isle of Man. And if we take the right steps, then we can realise these opportunities. If we do nothing about them, the opportunity might pass, or we might haphazardly stumble into it. But if we think about what opportunities do present themselves now, we can take actions to realise those opportunities as well. So 14 were identified. 3 were seen as economic opportunities. 2 were seen as opportunities for health and communities. 7 for the natural environment, and 2 across international dimensions. These range from negligible through to major opportunities. But none of the opportunities that we identified were less than a moderate potential by 2080 under both 2080 scenarios. So they are genuine risks that will have an impact in their specific areas. So I think first of all it's important to remember that this research considers risks and opportunities to be unabated. So the risks, this is what will happen if we do nothing about it. If we look at these risks and we say, okay, we're going to implement some actions, then we would update the risk register and it probably change. But this is the unabated risks. So if actions taken to mitigate, the scores could decrease or the opportunities could increase. For this reason, we'll be doing this sort of assessment every 5 years to track and update those risks. And the next steps really for the project are to review the current adaptation plans. We do have some, mostly in flooding, and then assess the current strength of those adaptation plans. And then a benefit-cost ratio will be done. So what are the benefits of adapting now? What is the cost of it? Not just what is the cost to us now as a bottom line in the treasury, but what would be the cost of not doing it? Can we afford to not adapt to climate change? So that's all part of the analysis here. And then finally, to recommend some adaptation actions as well. But ultimately, this work will form an Isle of Man adaptation strategy, where mitigation and resilience will be, actions will be agreed and hopefully implemented. So if I think back to like what Jens was saying, hopefully climate change is not the thing that brings the Isle of Man or the world to its knees, hopefully. But if we make these changes now, this could be part of that story that he's talking about, the story of the Isle of Man. And that's sort of what we're hoping to achieve. Is we're not doing this for our sake, we're doing it for the island and for the future of the Isle of Man.